visiting this program to teach the nation, that is Education Pe Charcha. I greet all of you, all my viewers. I greet all of you today on this 8th session of Education Pe Charcha. And this is Vivekanand Jha, author, academician, and a public intellectual, on Vidyadan's platform. This is Education Pe Charcha is synonymous with educating the nation. So therefore, we today, my dear viewers, as you all have been witnessing and experiencing, that we are bringing the specialized people with all sort of myriad achievements to their kitty from different fields of specializations. But today I tell you, my dear viewers, this particular platform, that is Education Pe Charcha, is going global, because we have a global statesman. That is today, a man who epitomizes versatility in himself. The man who was the Chief Election Commissioner of India, and one of the finest. Today I have no qualms, to admit the fact, to tell all of you that he, Shri Veeravalli Sundaram Sampath sir, in fact, has been India's greatest Chief Election Commissioner ever. I have no hesitation to make this announcement here on this public platform, dubbing Shri V.S. Sampath sir as India's greatest Chief Election Commissioner ever. Now, today we are going to have a very enlightening, a very electrifying sort of intellectual interaction with India's super watchdog of the Republic. And we will know, because today the scenario that is prevailing, and the scenario that prevailed when he took up as the Chief Election Commissioner of this country, how through his vision and foresightedness he brought about a radical change in the polity. All that we are going to understand, going to discuss today with our greatest Chief Election Commissioner ever of this Republic. Now, before I invite our honored guest today, it becomes very important to tell something about him. Otherwise, it would not amount to doing justice, to the man, the stalwart, the world statesman. Before I invite him to come in front of all of us. Shri Veeravalli Sundaram Sampath sir has been the 18th Chief Election Commissioner of the of our country. That is from 2012 to 2015. Retired on 15th of January 2015 after attaining the age of 65 years, because we all know this is the age of retirement for the constitutional functionary of this country as per the constitution. Now let us know something about his background, which is so very illustrious that it is unfathomable for anyone until unless he or she has visited his profile, which is there in Wikipedia. So it is in public domain. Administrative heads of large districts between 1975 and 1986. Thus, the stint, apart from giving him a strong grounding in public administration and policy implementation, also provided him a good exposure to election organization at the grassroots level as the district collector of the several coastal districts of Andhra Pradesh. Shri Sampath led a large teams in managing natural disasters and cyclone relief in rural areas. He also led several state-owned financial institutions and federations such as Apex Cooperative Bank, Handloom Marketing Society, Oil Seeds Federation, in Food and Public Distribution Department, Industries Department and Finance Department between 1986 and 1989. Later, he served as a secretary in Agriculture Department and principal secretary in Energy Department. He also served as the principal secretary of Finance, wherein he handled the state finance of Andhra Pradesh state with the annual budget of 51,000 crore, that is, which is equivalent to 8 billion American dollar. Later shifting to the union government in 2005, Sir was appointed as the Director General, National Institute of Rural Development. Subsequently, he held the post of Secretary, Chemicals and Petrochemicals, where he played a pivotal role in conceptualizing and implementing the PCPIR policy to help in the growth of petrochemical sector in India by facilitating massive investment in the identified regions. Later, he also served as a secretary in the Central Power Ministry. His main contribution was in shaping the restructured, accelerated power development and reforms program. Now we are coming to the his main role, primary role. Why I say so? Because none of his predecessors, barring Shri Session to some extent, dared to bite the bullet and transcend the limited vision that all his predecessors had shown. And he transcended that straight-jacketed definition of all his predecessors who had performed the stereotypical roles. But here, Shri V.S. Sampath, sir, he had managed to change that particular stereotypical vision and transcended the mediocrity, by his role as that of the Chief Election Commissioner of India. He became the world statesman. Why? I am just going to say now. He has successfully conducted the largest electoral exercise in the history of the world democracies. Mind you, in the history of world democracies, all that happened, when he presided over the destiny of the election commission of this country in the capacity of that of chief election commissioner. 14th general elections, in India, where 550 million voters out of 814 million eligible voters participated, and the highest voting percentage was recorded since independence. That is 66.7%, highest voters turnout. This election was applauded as the largest electoral exercise, in the world, and drew international praise. Discovery Channel also did a special show called The World's Biggest Election. So this was, it is just the infinitesimal part of his, of his credentials. Because if I go on telling more and more, entire program will be exhausted with the description of his such a rich details. Now I know I am going to invite respected Shri V.S. Sampath sir, but before that, it becomes an overdue. On behalf of 1.40 billion citizens of this country, first salute to India's greatest Chief Election Commissioner, respected Shri V.S. Sampath sir. Sir, accept my salutations on behalf of 1.40 billion of people of this country. You changed the nation's outlook. You brought glory to India, at the World Forum, sir. You are a world statesman. Sir, now,
thank you very much. Yeah, sir. Thank you.
Now, sir, I am coming to the question part. Sir, you're welcome to this education pe charcha, that is educating the nation. Sir, walking down the memory lane, could you kindly throw a searchlight into deeds of your role, into the decades of your role as a district collectors of several coastal districts in Andhra Pradesh. Sir, it's your take now. Let us all know, our viewers know about the some details of your beginning of your career as an IS officer in the capacity of district collector. Sir, it's your take.
Thank you, Jasab, for all the nice words you have spoken about my career. I feel really very grateful and accept all your nice words with great humility, however much I may or may not deserve to all the praise you showered on me. As we have seen from my CV, I have definitely specialized in handling coastal districts in erstwhile Andhra Pradesh state. the two districts, which many of you may be aware, Nellore district and Prakasham district in Andhra Pradesh. These are traditionally cyclone-prone districts. And for the first time, when we received cyclone warning, when I was collector of Prakasham district, I remember we have evacuated lakhs of people from the belt, that is those who live very close to the coast. Earlier to that, there was another very nasty cyclone in the history of Andhra Pradesh called Divi cyclone, Divi Sima cyclone. That was in late 70s. That cyclone had taken a very heavy toll in terms of human lives. After that, lots of exercise have been done in cyclone management, and we started the practice of evacuating the people who are living very close to the coast. And it has become almost a standard practice. Now, people are doing those things with much more systematic efforts. But those were the days of initial efforts. In fact, it used to be very difficult to persuade people to come out, because they used to say, we have been living, we have seen so many cyclones, we will not give up our homes, and we will not go out, etc. Lots of efforts. Take them out, keep them in highlands, feed them for 4 days, 5 days, 1 week, etc. And then send them back, give them something for their livelihood, to restore their life. All this used to be very great effort. And those days, budget available was very limited. It's not like today when 10,000 crores, 1 lakh crores is spent just like that. But in those days, spending a few lakhs of rupees meant tremendous effort, tremendous responsibility. I have to say, to the credit of the people with whom I had handled these, we were able to work and help the people in cyclone affected areas with maximum possible efficiency and with minimum loss. And in all these cyclones, we always used to have two parts. One, immediate relief efforts. Second, long-term rehabilitation measures. All this had to be done to a very large extent. I would say a state like Andhra Pradesh had become almost a specialized state in cyclone mitigation efforts. In addition to that, I had my experience to work as a district collector of a district called Chittoor. All of you might have heard about Tirupati. Tirupati is part of Chittoor district. A unique thing about Chittoor district is it has all kinds of areas within that, like urban area, like Tirupati, drought-prone area, one whole division called Madanapalli used to be drought-prone area. Programs like DPAP were organized there. Some areas are very close to the coast. These things gave very rich experience in handling different situations in life. Even in those days, I recall the first election I had conducted, that is post-emergency. In 1977, soon after emergency was lifted, so election was held. Then I was the assembly returning officer for a constituency called Parchu. From there, I had come a very long way when I had become election commissioner and chief election commissioner. Starting from one assembly constituency, I had started organizing electoral efforts for the entire country in 2014. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Sir, now my next question is, you conceptualized as well as implemented the PCPIR policy to help the growth of the petrochemical sector in India by facilitating a massive investment in the identified regions. Now, what this policy was and how it impacted the petrochemical sector in India. Your take on this, sir?
We have a very large coastline. India can be rightly proud of it, with a number of port towns. And for the petrochemical industry, like refinery, petroleum products, etc., instead of dissipating our energy over vast area, we made an effort during that period, during the year 2007, 2008, 2009, to identify some areas which are close to the port, where we will concentrate all our efforts in providing infrastructure for development of petroleum and petrochemical industries. Now, in fact, even in those days, a number of foreign players who used to come, they would always say, "You have very giant refineries in India on the west coast. Would we be allowed to set up our refineries in different parts and survive in the face of this kind of competition?" At the highest level in government, we used to secure assurances and tell them, "We will do it." That will mean in those areas you will provide power, captive power, roads infrastructure, and helping them to set up their industries with basic port facilities. And of course, I was there only for the conception of that policy and also selecting some initial areas identification. It was left to the people who came later to follow it up in states like West Bengal, Orissa, Andhra Pradesh. Some areas were identified, program was launched. I'm sure it must be going on in full steam now. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Now my next question is, as a secretary in the Central Power Ministry, you were instrumental in pioneering restructured, accelerated power development and reforms program. How did it contribute towards the implementation of power sector, towards the improvement of power sector? Your take on this, sir?
Actually, that is a very interesting program. It is more like the electrification of villages, electrification of rural households. Basically, thrust is that. And the beauty in that was, it was announced almost in the election year, before 2009 elections. And as you know, the procedures in the government, by the time it goes through various stages in government, like planning commission, finance, getting all the clearance, etc., it came very close to the election period for the logic of it. As you know, 2009 elections took place in April, May of 2009. And by the time the final clearance for this program was issued, it was almost like January, February. Very close. Normally, when any program gets launched very close to the election, it's very difficult because most of the attention of the machinery will be on election, conduct of election, election management. But still, since this was such a good program of electrification of rural areas, rural households, in fact, during that period, almost about a month, we made use of these organizations like NTPC, Power Grid, Power Finance Corporation. We made full use of these giants. Particularly, Power Finance Corporation was nodal for organizing this program. Almost every week, we used to call power secretaries from states to come up with proposals, because they all used to be very skeptical that so close to the elections, how would any central government department be giving clearances for these things? But we disproved all their fears. We used to call almost every week. They will come one day in advance. They will sit in the Power Finance Corporation. Proposals will be vetted. We used to call the finance representative, like the director in the finance ministry. He used to come, sit with us. We constituted a nodal group almost on a weekly basis. We used to give the clearance, and I would say that is one of the programs implementation of which in very short period gave me tremendous satisfaction, because normally I have seen replies to parliamentary standing committees, etc. Why we were not able to implement the program when clearance for the program comes very close to the end of the financial year. We belayed all those things. We launched the program, and that year, to my satisfaction, I should say, we utilized the funds fully by releasing everything to the states based on viable projects submitted by them. That is how I always think that's a program launching of which gave very great satisfaction to me. But unfortunately, even before the next year, as you might recall, in the month of April, in the third week of April, I moved to the Election Commission. In fact, I had the privilege of being associated with two general elections, because I came when 2009 election was halfway through. I was there, part of conducting 2009 election, and of course, I conducted 2014 as CEC along with two other commissioners. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And actually, sir, by way of recollection, I think that, Shri T.N. Thakurji, he must have been heading the Power Finance Corporation.
Yeah.
Because the moment he also has been a stalwart, in terms of implementing the vision. Thank you, sir.
Correct.
Thanks a lot. Sir, now I'm coming to a very, very important question, because now, your main role, your primary role as that of the Chief Election Commissioner, Chief Election Commissioner of this country now begins. 14th general elections in India was historic, which created the history for the world democracies. How could you manage to create the largest electoral exercise in the world when there was no precedent in the past? How could you conceptualize and eventually implement such a grand vision, that too at such a gargantuan scale? Your take on this, sir?
Yeah. In fact, I have to accept in all humility that conducting a general election in India, perhaps people like me should not take undue credit, because election is basically conducted at district level and below. We have a very well-oiled election machinery for conducting the election. The district collector or deputy commissioner or district magistrate is also district election officer. And below him, at subdivisional level, we have what is called assistant returning officers. Usually, district collectors are returning officers for parliamentary constituencies. Or sometimes one district collector will be, or district magistrate will be returning officer for more than one parliamentary constituency if it does not have so many senior officers there. Then at the state level, we have a chief electoral officer who coordinates election efforts at state level under instructions of election commission. We actually organize election effort at national level. For your information and for the information of your enlightened audience, we have to say the efforts for a general election, they start roughly 18 months before the scheduled election. 18 months. And Central Election Commission, which comprises the CEC and two election commissioners, they would have visited almost every state at least two times before ordering a general election. 2 times. Each time when we go to the state, we not only have meeting with entire machinery, including district magistrate, superintendents of police at district level, all senior officers at state level, we invariably have meeting with political parties also. After holding such meetings in every state. The last spell would be a media conference. We will invite the media in which we will explain how far election efforts have come, what is the readiness of election machinery at the state level and at district level for the conduct of the election. And also, what is the feedback we got from political parties? Political parties will tell us like how things are going on. They would also tell whether there is any kind of partiality or partisan behavior on the part of any of the officers associated with election effort. They would also tell us from time to time about any kind of misuse of governmental machinery by the state governments. Usually, again, all these things are in the open. The entire election effort of Election Commission is held in a glass house. After the political parties make the presentation before us, each one of them will go out. Press will be waiting, media will be waiting outside. They will tell them what they have told the Election Commission. When we have the media conference, media representatives will again confront us. Is it a fact that such and such political party has told you these things? What is your reaction? How you are going to deal with this? These things, and again, they will give their opinion not only about the impartiality of governmental machinery, political executive, but also the other conditions, like seasonal conditions, particularly when our meeting is held very close to the election date, they will say, these are the areas where you should not have election on these days for these reasons. Like that, we would be getting all kinds of feedback. We try to factor all these things when we work out the election schedule. And one of the things which we do, particularly like usually you must have seen, the election date for national election takes place in April, May. So that will mean just on that January 1st of that year will be the year when electoral roll will be finalized. All those who have reached the election eligibility, they will be interested in getting their names included. So there will be extraordinary interest in political parties in getting people enrolled in last electoral roll, which will be the basis for conduct of the election. In fact, electoral roll, once there is a roll which has utmost purity, you can say we have done about 60 to 70% of election. If you don't have a good roll, that election will be a flawed election. So we will associate political parties. There is a very elaborate process. Electoral rolls are reviewed, revised every year, but electoral roll in poll going year, the year of the general election, is a very important electoral roll. Even those who do not pay attention for enrolling themselves in other areas will take special efforts to get themselves enrolled on that year. I have to share with you one very interesting thing we did in that year, which was followed for some time by my successors. I don't know whether it is followed now or not. Usually, whenever we hold the election, on the day of the election, some of the people will come out and say their names were there on the rolls all along. This year, their names were not there in the rolls, and they were disappointed. They could not cast their votes. This would be almost some certain percentage of grievances on the day of the poll in several places. We have heard this every time. So we thought when we ordered the general election for 2014, we ordered the election, or we had an international, the press conference on 5th March when we announced the election schedule. When we announced that, we also said that 5th March, I remember, was a Wednesday. We said, since we have been hearing grievances in every election by people that they have been voting in the previous elections, this time surprisingly their names are not there in the rolls. We said we will give one ultimate opportunity for such voters to verify whether their names are in the rolls or not by displaying electoral rolls in polling stations on the very next Sunday, which was the 9th March. And we gave instructions to all our election machinery to keep polling station open on that day when we have what is called booth level officer. He will be sitting with the electoral roll, which will be followed in the next election. They will be sitting, they will be keeping Form 6, etc. on that day. People were encouraged to go there, verify whether their names are there, the rolls are not, because even at that time, since this is announced quite some time before the election date, there is enough time for people to file their application with the necessary documentation to get their names included if they are eligible, if their names are left out. And I can tell you with pride, as many as 84 lakhs applications for enrollment were received on that one day. Whoever was eligible, we could get them enrolled. We had the satisfaction of giving an opportunity for voters even at that late stage so that those who are interested can verify the roll and file their application. This is one of, I would say, hallmarks of conduct of 2014 election to ensure inclusiveness in the election process. That's it.
Sir, actually, it was such a remarkable process that you just articulated. Let me share with you a small experience on this, what you have said, sir. In this last general election I'm talking about, that is in the year 2019, as well as the latest West Bengal election which was conducted, so many people did not find their names in the eligible vote in the voters list, and they could not cast their franchise. Some of the people got in touch with me also, but sir, actually, since I was not in Kolkata, or I could not do anything as such. When you say, I think that the incumbent chief election commissioners or election commissioner in the states, they are not at all following this process, or else those who could not cast their franchise, and if the sort of procedure that you laid down, which enabled more than 84,000 people to get incorporated, and subsequently they could vote. There's, if that process would have been in continuation, many people, many electorate who are losing the right of franchise, that could have been averted. That situation could have been averted, sir. So, there is a really, what I would say, this is a fate of the nation, that when you laid down such a glorious footsteps, your successors, unfortunately or ironically, they are no longer following those glorious footsteps. So nice of you, sir. Thanks for our enlightenment on this very important point. So, you undertook several pioneering steps for electoral innovations. Number one, expenditure monitoring. Elections to where over 21,000 flying squads were deployed. Voter verified paper audit trail. This is, sir, you have to explain to us. Nota, no, none of the above. It was you had pioneered it. You are the person who pioneered Nota, which continues till now. So, sir, none of the, now your take on this, sir, on all these points, please, sir.
Wonderful. I'm really very happy that you are flagging very relevant issues. In addition to what you have mentioned, one of the things about which we really felt proud is issue of voter identity slips. See, actually, voter identity slips is issued generally by political parties, more as a guidance for the voter to know where is polling station, which school building, in which wing, etc. So otherwise, people will have to go stand in the queue at wrong polling station At the last, somebody will tell them, not here, go somewhere else. He has to wait in the queue for another 2 hours, etc. If they don't have the benefit of these slips. But then the political parties, usually, they try to give the slips only for their voters, only for their supporters, not for others. So we started, actually this was not started by me, it was started even earlier in the commission in which I was a member. And we made it photo ID slips, so that picture of the voter also will be there in that, and it will be signed by assistant returning officer, that is the Tahsildar. What we did was, we found that this is almost like a miniature voter ID card. So we even made an announcement, if somebody has got that photo voter ID slip, he doesn't need any other identification document. He can just go cast his vote with that, because it contains his photo, it contains the signature of Tahsildar or assistant returning officer, and he can go and cast his vote. This is one of the factors which took the voting percentage to the highest level. Because I had a feeling, or we had a feeling, that even the photo ID card which is given to the voters, many other poor people, they may not even know to keep it in safe custody, because this is required only once in 5 years. How many of us we really keep in safe custody a document which we need only once in 5 years? So keeping that in mind, we did that. Another thing which we did at the time was, since this election was held in peak summer, so April, May, lot of sunlight was there. Except in some extremely affected areas, the entire rest of the country, we made 11 hours as the polling hours. It started at 7 in the morning, went up to 6 in the evening, because there was ample sunlight. These are some of the factors which really helped increase voting percentage. These are some of the things I thought I will tell for the information of your enlightened participants. Then coming to the other things like NOTA, expenditure monitoring, teams, etc. Over a period of time, this is something which started from the days of Mr. Session, as you mentioned, who is a legendary figure. He actually came down heavily on the muscle power to a very large extent, with the deployment of central paramilitary forces. Muscle power had been substantially controlled in our country. But with the economic reforms, with the newfound health subsequent to 1990s, actually there is a correlation between states where money power is most prevalent and the states which are the beneficiaries of this kind of economic reforms, which is mostly southern India and western India. It is in this belt you also find the dominant role of money power. So to contain that, I would not claim we have been able to be fully successful in containing, but we have done to a very large extent in containing that by constituting those teams. We also added some central paramilitary force also to those mobile squads. They will intensify their inspections, visits, and establishing special checkposts very close to the poll. There used to be complaints also of excesses. Naturally, there will be, because when people are going on the highways, almost every 50 kilometers, every 40 kilometers, there will be check and long lines of vehicles. These things were causing inconvenience, but people were using transportation of money. I can say, I don't want to name a state and malign the state. When people found we were checking all the vehicles, they used to carry money in ambulances, because you can't stop an ambulance and check. Like that, all this should be there, but it's almost a no-win battle between those people who want to resort to malpractices and machinery, which tries to check it. Then coming to Nota. Nota was introduced because of the efforts of Supreme Court. Some of the civil society organizations, they approached the Supreme Court. Actually, Nota can be introduced only by an amendment to the rules. Because earlier, when people had the option of using ballot papers, they could go into the polling station. If they don't find any of the candidate, they can simply put their stamp on all the candidates so that the vote becomes invalid. That is how they can show their displeasure on all the candidates. But if you don't want to do it, then you should not go into the polling station. Right? If you don't go into the polling station to cast your vote, there is a possibility of some unscrupulous element keeping a watch on you. They can go and cast a false vote, a spurious vote. These are all the malpractices which are inherent in our system. So, some of the civil society organizations have been saying voter should have a right to go to the polling station, and the exercise is option for none of the above. Nota is that, none of the above. They went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court asked for the views of the Election Commission. We said we also want that facility to be given to the voter. That involves amendment to the rules. Rules can be made only by the government. We have already made the recommendation. We are waiting for it. It is taking some time. Supreme Court asked us, if we give you a direction now to introduce that nota, can you do that? I said, we have no problem. Give a direction, we'll implement. Guardedly, Supreme Court said, we are giving a direction to introduce nota in poll process, but keeping in view practical difficulties, they said, you do it gradually. But from the day we received it, because it means only introducing one more column in ballot paper or in ballot box. We introduced it from that day in all the elections, 100%. If we could do that, I would say to the majority of the Indian electorate during the 2014 elections, nationally, percentage of votes backed by nota was only 1%. We even had some fear in some extremist areas, in some areas like Jammu and Kashmir, because of the influence of extremist elements. Voters can be pressurized into doing very large percentage. It did not happen. Voters showed tremendous maturity in doing. But there are other issues like people asking, what if nota gets majority of votes? Then will it disqualify the elected candidate? When this was raised before the Supreme Court said, these are the matters which can be handled only by Parliament. They have to be done by Act and rules. We cannot say. That is something on which government, Parliament will have to take a call and say what happens if nota gets majority votes. That's one. Second side is VVPAT. By then, VVPAT was approved after a lot of trials by Supreme Court. They gave a direction, VVPAT shall be introduced. Government also made necessary changes in the rules, law ministry, by way of subordinate legislation. It came in 2014 parliamentary election. On an experimental basis, we introduced VVPAT in 8 parliamentary constituencies. A New Delhi constituency in Delhi was one such. Of course, in last 2019 election, it was extended for entire country. VVPAT is working very successfully in our country today. That's it.
Great, sir. Sir, since you have raised the question, the pertinent question of this malpractices, especially money power, muscle power, sir, I would like to ask you a very, very important question. the electoral democracy in India, needs a very substantive sort of reform, especially in case of this black money which is being inserted into the economy, especially during elections. Now, sir, I'm coming to a very, very important question. If you were the chief election commissioner now, maybe you can take it as a hypothetical question, but it has a tremendous ramification as well as implication for the entire polity. Sir, against the background of this corona, now election commission had conducted the election in West Bengal and in so many other states. Should not have the election commission, against the background of this corona, issued a guideline that all the political parties, they could only campaign from on the basis of door to door, without there being a big political gathering of people and all that, and thereby the election commission could have specified or stipulated only a particular sum of money that could be invested by each candidate, and consequently the huge amount of money which goes into election could have been stopped or could have been checked, and it could have set a very good precedent for the future. So don't you think that chief election commissioner or election commission as a constitutional body had failed to live up to the aspiration and expectation of 1.40 billion of people of India by just continuing with the same tradition as it has been going on? So your take on this, sir? I think election commission has really forgone a golden opportunity. Your take on this, sir?
This is a very difficult and ticklish question. All that I can tell you is this. The tradition in conduct of elections in our country is such that every election commission has tried to improve upon whatever practices that have been followed previously. It is a process of constant improvement. But you can always have your own expectations, how far this is an improvement, how far improvement is not meeting the expectations of the people. These are all, different stories. I, for one, would not like to comment on the efforts of the election commission because I salute every one of them for trying to do their best. But the issue raised by you is a larger one. It is not only in the context of corona. In general also, we should constantly keep moving towards curtailing the role of money power, whether with corona or without corona. This is what I would like to say. Actually, what you are saying is a very sensible thing, whether as a nation we can afford this kind of large rallies. See, there is a restriction on expenditure by the candidate. Okay, even one such rally is enough to disqualify a candidate because maximum amount for a candidate for a parliamentary constituency, if you look at any of these rallies, one rally would have cost more than that expenditure limit of the candidate. But the flaw in our system, it is a flaw in our system. I don't think we can really blame any election commission for it because laws are not made by election commission. One of the flaws, main flaw is while there is a restriction on or limits on the expenditure by the candidate, there is no limit on the expenditure by political parties. This is a very major flaw. Second thing which has happened is, by law, they have introduced what is called star campaigners. Star campaigners are supposed to be the campaigners, that is, leaders of political parties who are supposed to do campaigning mainly with reference to policies and programs of the political parties. As long as they are not candidate oriented, the expenditure incurred. Actually, law only says travel expenses of star campaigners. But by practice, they have extended that to meetings of the star campaigners also. So that is how today you find, while candidates are able to keep their expenditure within the limit of 70 lakhs or whatever, which was in our period, when it comes to this expenditure on account of star campaigner, just one meeting may cost 1 crore or it may cost 2 crores, but that is not booked in the expenditure of the candidate. This is we pointed out that, in fact, our entire electoral law relating to political parties is a very weak one. I need not go into greater detail. All of you know about that. One of the main things is relating to the finances of political parties. There is very little transparency with regard to raising of finance by the political parties. Very little transparency with regard to the accounts and audits of the political parties. Very little transparency with regard to the expenditure of the political parties. Electoral bond is the latest thing in that. So I don't want to appear to be critical of any particular measure, etc. But broadly, the role of political parties, financing of the political parties, expenditure of the political parties in the context of the election, it requires much greater in-depth study. This is something which is plaguing our electoral politics. If this is addressed, most of the things which you are telling, plus what you are telling is a much larger thing. Today, when you have got electronic media, etc., is it really necessary for having such large gatherings which pose particular threat to the people in the context of corona infection, etc.? Very valid points, but this cannot be looked at in isolation. It has to be looked at in larger context, is all I am telling. Beyond the point, Election Commission alone, I would say that Election Commission is more sinned against than sinning in this, because it is something which requires much larger handling. That's it. I'm not trying to hold a brief for anyone, but it has to be viewed in its larger context and handled. That's it.
Sir, in this very context, I would like to remind you that you are the only election commissioner, chief election commissioner, I beg your pardon, who enforced Article 324 of the Indian Constitution, and thereby to bring this expenditure, so-called, the excess of expenditure to account. And in the very context, you disqualified Mr. Ashok Chavan because of on this parameter of his is exceeding the overall limit. So, sir, what I say, once again, I would like to go back to the previous question. You say I am fully in agreement with you, I am fully subscribing to your observation. But, sir, as you took an unprecedented stand, which also were subject to a massive or rather rigorous criticism from various political parties then, but you took that stand boldly and audaciously. Likewise, if the Constitutional Office of Election Commission, keeping in view the outbreak of this pandemic, would have gone ahead with this, the sort of putting cap or especially banning the large-scale campaigning, and it would have been confined from just to door-to-door campaigning, wouldn't it would have been added to our democracy further and would have put a curb on such a huge expenditure on the political campaigning and all that? So I am talking about some sort of audacity to have been exhibited on the part of the constitutional body called Election Commission. I am not naming anybody, but whoever is presiding over his destiny, for him it was a golden opportunity to have implemented this, come what may. Whatever might be the criticism in its wake, he should have taken it in its stride. But nation would have benefited hugely. Your say on this, sir?
Yeah, see, like once we leave an office, it is really not proper to put ourselves in the shoes of the people who are there today and express any verdict or opinion. I would say that it is not a fair thing for the people who are sitting there today. This is one. Second thing is, probably, again, I am not trying to hold a brief for anyone. Each one is entitled to his own views. See, in the pandemic only, some other elections, I think Bihar elections were held. Some other elections were held. They were able to managed to pull off some other elections with minimum damage. I don't know whether these things had worked in the mind of the people, but then whatever it is, when it comes to dealing with the lives of the people in a pandemic like that, naturally, a lot more caution is required. They have tried to do something in their judgment. I am sure these are all evolving process. I am sure they will keep these lessons in mind when they conduct next elections.
Okay, sir. Well, in fact, you threw an adequate light, but this is my opinion as a thinking citizen of this country, that the constitutional body of election commission should have come up with this sort of, very strict measure. The way you dare to transcend the mediocrity and brought Mr. Ashok Chavan to task. This was a golden opportunity for the constitutional body of election commission, which it just lost. It was a lost opportunity, sir. This is my and the opinion of the thinking citizens of this country, because election has become a quid pro quo. Quid pro quo has been institutionalized in our republic, and all the political parties are taking donations from the corporate houses, and they are just giving return to them once they are in power. This has become the norms of the day. So now I'm coming to a very important question. So this of late there has been an ostensible erosion in the autonomy of the constitutional office of the election commission. What is your opinion on this? You don't hold anyone's brief, be a citizen of this republic, the man who served the nation with the fullest of honesty. What's your take on this?
See, the election commission, there are 4 main tenets which qualify a polity for democracy. One is universal suffrage, autonomous election management body, timeliness in conduct of the elections, transparent election process. And any international body which evaluates the electoral bodies in the world, they do based on these 4 parameters. By and large, I would say, we as a nation have been satisfying these 4 criteria. I'm not saying with reference to commission of one period. See, after all, you know very well, even after the emergency, election which was held after the emergency, not many of us will even remember the name of the chief election commissioner. But that election was conducted fairly. And the person who was ruling the country during emergency was ousted. She lost her own seat. That is the tradition of election commission in this country. Whether you know the name of the person or not is immaterial. But the election commissions have been autonomous. But then, when it comes to autonomy of election management body, the CEC particularly is equated with judge of the Supreme Court. So that means no CEC can be removed from office for displeasing the powers that be. That is how this kind of a protection is given. But I have to tell you one thing in a very larger context. Again, this is not holding a brief for anyone. Traditionally, if you look at, I am trying to talk a little philosophically, not getting into present commission or previous commission. If you look at it, our election commissions or our institutions, why single out election commission? Our institutions have asserted themselves where the political executive was weak or where political executive was not very strong. You tell me whether institutions were able to assert themselves where there was somebody like Rajiv Gandhi as the Prime Minister with 400 MPs. See, this is some kind of a delicate balance between strength of the political executive, strength of the institutions. Don't single out only election commission. I would say because all these institutions collectively, they account for the strength of the democracy. The democracy will be as strong as the strength of the institutions. So there is always a balance between these two. When one becomes rather unduly strong, it starts the erosion of the institutions. So what is the way to restore the balance? It's for people like you to come up. This is not to say that institutions need not assert their autonomy. Institutions have to assert their autonomy. What is the use of giving Supreme Court judge status to the CEC if he cannot assert his position? I'm not saying they should exhibit weakness, no. But this is something which perhaps indescribably, I'm not saying inevitably, indescribably happens when this balance between the two gets disturbed. That's what happens. I am sure. That is again the difference between, like for example, if you have been watching, they lost a presidential election in US, despite the incumbent president speaking to the governor or the returning officer at state level. They refused. They did not. See, that is how institutions come of age. I am sure our institutions also will come of age. These are all temporary periods. That's it.
Okay, sir. So, of course, you have made a very, your words of wisdom, definitely, I think our viewers would appreciate. Sir, actually, this is the question I would like to ask you, because we are coming to the end of such an electrifying, such a scintillating session. Sir, with the Office of Indian Election Commission, being, since I've already mentioned this point, being on an ostensible decline, this is not my perception, this is what newspapers and general people's perception. It is a matter of humongous concern for the people of India, because the constitutional checks and balance appears to be incompatible with each other, because as your honored self said that, you know, some sort of balance has to be there. Executive was weak, institution exerted, but today executive has become extremely strong, and consequently the checks and balance appears to be in the state of disarray. So how there can be a proper balance between the executive as well as the checks and balance? Otherwise democracy is going to be in danger, or rather it has been endangered because of this checks and balance getting in the state of disarray, getting some sort of off balance. Your say on this, sir?
You kindly recall the four main tenets of electoral democracy. One of them is transparent process. I can tell you in India, not today, for generations of election commission, this transparent process is followed. As long as this transparent process is followed, rest assured, even if the incumbents experience or exhibit some weakness, transparent process will take care of it. It is not so easy to go against that and buckle under pressure. This is something which will assert itself as long as we follow transparent process. So far, there is no reason to believe that this is not followed or this will be given a go by. You will even see in elections which have been held, can you really tell me whether there was any miscarriage of elections in any of the elections? Even in West Bengal election, whatever may be the grievances, has not the right verdict been delivered. So that way, ultimately, our system will thrive. It is not so easy to demolish the system. It will be there, though there may be some temporary setbacks here. That's it. There is no need to be unduly pessimistic about it. That's it.
So nice of you, sir. You have assured the nation, through me, you have assured the nation that in fact there is nothing to fear. Democracy has its own checks and balances, and it is not easy to bypass or overcome the system. Maybe, it might be a temporary phase, but indeed the system will prevail at last. So, in fact, we have, we are glad, by way of a message, sir, because as I already said, that, sir, in the beginning, as we kick started our program, I described you, not I, but the nation perceives you as a global statesman, because in the capacity of a chief election commissioner of this nation, the sort of the highest, the highest stage of uprightness that you exhibited while presiding over the destiny of India's election commission, that itself remains a glorious precedent in the history of the nation. I remember, sir, in the famous landmark judgment of Kesavanand Bharati versus State of Kerala, great Nani Palkiwala, one of the greatest constitutional jurist ever of this country, writes in his very famous book, We the People, where he pays his glowing tributes to Justice Supreme Court, one of the most esteemed judges of the Supreme Court, Justice H.R. Khanna, for upholding the truth, for upholding the values of law, especially when there was such polarization, being orchestrated by the power that be at that particular point of time. Likewise, if I have no qualms, no hesitation to say that as great Justice H.R. Khanna upheld the value of our constitution, as great Nani Palkiwala, through his forceful argument, institutionalized the value of India's democracy by forcefully persuading the august bench to retain the basic structure, as unchangeable, as a very important integral part of democracy, which is not subject to or not amenable to any change. Likewise, sir, very humbly but unambiguously, I would like to articulate here to all my viewers that our honorable guest today, respected Shri V.S. Sampath sir, has been an equivalent of Justice H.R. Khanna, by way of a constitutional functionary, to uphold the gravity of the constitutional office that he presided over in the capacity of the chief election commissioner of this great republic. So today it was a wonderful session. You reassured us, and through me you reassured the nation, which is undergoing some sort of palpitation, that the process of democracy appears to be somehow distorted. But through your very logical and rational argument, and your own experience, on the basis of your own experience, you reassured the nation yet again when you said so lucidly, so unambiguously, that it is not easy to bypass the system, howsoever powerful the executive might be, but it is not easy to bypass or overcome the system. You have reassured us, all, the entire nation of 1.40 billion people of this country. So it has been a wonderful session. You enlightened all of us through the words of your wisdom. We are glad at this Education Pe Charcha that today our platform has become global, because you condescended to my request to grace and bless us through this platform, and thereby through an interface to the entire citizens, fellow compatriots of this country. So before I conclude, it is through all my honesty, my pure-heartedness, I appeal to the Honorable Prime Minister of India, the incumbent government, that, sir, Honorable Prime Minister, sir, that today I, in the capacity of an author, the person who wrote 3 books on on you and Hindu nationalism, I request you on the behalf of the nation that Honorable Shri V.S. Sampath sir deserves Bharat Ratna in no uncertain terms. The man who showed light to the nation. Please, Mr. Prime Minister, humble request of the nation to consider awarding Bharat Ratna to our Honorable Sir, Dr. Shri V.S. Sampath sir, because he deserves it. Let Prime Minister show that, because he time and time again, he has been talking all this while about meritocracy. Let the Prime Minister insulate this highest civilian award from the clutches of politicians and bestow it upon the most deserving face of the bureaucrat of this country. That is Shri V.S. Sampath sir deserves it in all, certainty, the highest civilian award. And I reassure and I give my commitment to the viewers that I am going to write an application on behalf of the nation to appeal to the Honorable Prime Minister and his government that he should come out with this particular announcement that Shri B.S. Sampath, who has forthrightly, very, with a tremendous sense of honesty, like what Munshi Premchandji has described in his, priceless story of Namak Ka Daroga. He had served the nation with a distinction. And I say, though the legendary Session Sahab had done something great, but even Shri Sampath Sahab has done something greater. That is why, without meaning any disrespect to, great Session Sahab, I say that Shri B.S. Sampath ji, who is a living legend of this country, deserves Bharat Ratna, and Prime Minister should come out for the sake of his love and affection for the nation to bestow this highest civilian award upon the great statesman, world statesman, that is Shri B.S. Sampath. This is an appeal from Vivekanand Jha, author and convener of this particular forum, Education Pe Charcha, to the Honorable Prime Minister, the beloved Prime Minister of this nation. And my viewers, today you have heard such a scintillating words coming from the man of wisdom. Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore writes in Gitanjali, where the words comes from the depth of truth, where the knowledge is free, into that land of freedom, into that heaven of freedom, my father, let the country awake. So this is Shri B.S. Sampath sir, much according to the vision of Gurudev Tagore, had performed the Karma Yoga. That is, as per Bhagavad Gita, what Lord says, describe the qualities of Satoguni. Shri B.S. Sampath sir has followed in letter and spirit all the code of conduct, the ethics that Sri Krishna has incorporated, had spoken from his holy mouth in Bhagavad Gita. So my viewers, you have heard today, great world statesman Shri B.S. Sampath, illuminating our discussion, Education Pe Charcha. I think that it has been the wonderful session today. And on 14th of August, again, the world academician, Dr. Sri Deepak Jain sir, the only academician, only man to have become dean in USA, Europe and Asia, is going to illuminate all of you on global education. Now it is the time now to part ways with our most honored guest, our respected, beloved sir, Shri B.S. Sampath sir. I tell you, as and when I call you, the moment I hear his voice, I feel a deep peace coming from inside. I think he's a paradigm. The man who worked for the nation, the man who worked for 1.40 billion of people without favor or fear, the man who has been really a man who deserves salutation. Before I conclude, I salute you once again, sir, on behalf of 1.40 billion people of this country. Thanks for joining us, for illuminating our soul, sir. I bow down, to your humility, to your conspicuous presence today. My viewers, I also thank all of you for watching us. Those who will view this video subsequently will know a lot about the world statesman's views, enlightened views on election commission, electoral practices. With these words, I am returning all of you, and with a commitment, I will be back again on next Saturday at the same time, 7 p.m. live. Thank you, sir. Thanks to all.